Do you know how long a single second feels to a fly? To you, it's barely enough time to blink, but to a fly, that same second might feel 4 times longer than it feels to you. Long enough to watch your hand coming, calculate the angle, and disappear before you even finish the swat. So here's the real question. If a fly can experience time slower than you, does a dog feel a minute the same way you do? Does an elephant experience a year the way you experience one? And if animals don't feel time the way we do, then what does time actually feel like to them? Because here's the strange part. Time isn't something you see or touch, it's something your brain builds. And if every brain is different, then maybe every creature is living inside its own private version of now. Let's start with something scientists actually measured. In 2013, a team led by biologist Kevin Healy studied something called flicker fusion frequency. In simple terms, it's the speed at which an animal's eyes can process separate flashes of light before they blur into one continuous image. Humans process around 60 flickers per second. That's why old movie projectors don't look choppy to us. But flies process light at nearly 250 flickers per second, which means, in a very real sense, a fly's world moves in slow motion. What looks like an instant to you could feel like several seconds to them. That's not a metaphor. That's a measurable biological difference in how time is being processed. But here's where things get strange, because if flicker rate determines time perception, smaller animals with faster metabolisms should experience the world in slow motion compared to bigger, slower ones. And when researchers compared species, that's almost exactly what they found. Small, fast-moving animals like birds and rodents had higher flicker fusion rates. Larger, slower animals like elephants had lower ones, which raises an unsettling thought. An elephant might experience a single afternoon the way you experience it speeding by in fast forward. Now, if perception speed is one half of the puzzle, memory is the other. And this is where the story gets even more interesting. For decades, scientists believed animals couldn't remember specific past events the way humans do. This idea was called episodic memory, the ability to recall not just facts, but a moment in time. What happened, where it happened, and when. Then, in 1998, psychologist Nicola Clayton ran an experiment on western scrub jays that changed everything. These birds hide food to eat later. Clayton found that jays didn't just remember where they hid food, they remembered how long ago they hid it. If they had stored worms, which rot quickly, and too much time had passed, the jays avoided digging them up. But if they'd hidden nuts, which last longer, they went straight for them regardless of how many days had gone by. That's not instinct. That's something closer to a memory of time itself, which means at least some birds may carry a mental timeline, not unlike the one you use to remember what you did yesterday. But then scientists discovered something even more unexpected. Rats, when trained to estimate short time intervals, show something researchers call the internal clock model, first proposed by psychologist John Gibbon and later expanded by Warren Meck. Their studies found that a rat's brain uses a kind of biological stopwatch, a rhythmic pulse generated somewhere in the brain that ticks at a fairly steady rate. And when researchers manipulated dopamine levels in these animals, the clock sped up or slowed down. The rats began misjudging time entirely, waiting too long or not long enough for a reward, which means time for a rat isn't fixed. It's chemical. And if a rat's sense of time can be spent up or slowed down with dopamine, ask yourself this. Is your own perception of time as stable as you think it is because you already know the answer, even if you never thought about it this way? Time drags during a boring meeting. It vanishes during something exciting. Fear stretches seconds into what feels like minutes. That's not you imagining it. That's dopamine and adrenaline literally altering how your brain processes time, the exact same mechanism scientists found in rats. Which brings us to the real mystery. If a fly experiences a slowed down world, if a scrub jay carries a memory calendar in its head, if a rat's sense of time bends with brain chemistry, then time was never one universal experience shared by every living thing. It was never really out there at all. It was built moment by moment inside every brain complex enough to build it. Every species alive right now might be living through the exact same afternoon at a completely different speed. So the next time you watch a dog waiting by the door, or a bird pause mid-flight, or an insect vanish before you can react, remember this. They aren't just in a different body. They might be living in a different version of time itself. And if that's true for them, how sure are you that the version of time you're living in is even the real one?